Now it's my enormous pleasure to introduce our graduation speaker, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. SIPA is an interdisciplinary hub of global public policy research and engagement and training. And in our core fields, we have deep regional engagements, including through capstone projects and workshops, faculty research, and degrees specializing in different regions of the world. The study of economic development, international institutions, and Africa is an important part of what we do. And this year alone, more than 50 of our students undertook field work around the world and engaged in areas such as development economics, food security, infectious diseases, and more. Today, we are really honored to have with us a leader whose remarkable career and character has touched these areas and has demonstrated commitment to addressing the most pressing challenges in her own home country of Nigeria, more broadly in Africa, and has been a leader in the World Bank and global engagement around global challenges. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is quite simply among the most recognized and influential global leaders and thinkers on economic development, international organizations, and the future of Africa. From 2011 to 2015, she led Nigeria's Ministry of Finance with an expanded portfolio as coordinating minister for the nation's economy. She previously served as finance minister from 2003 to 2006, and also as foreign minister for a brief period as well, the first woman to hold either position. As managing director of the World Bank from 2007 to 2011, she oversaw an $81 billion operational portfolio in Africa, Europe, and South and Central Asia, and she spearheaded major initiatives to assist low-income countries during the 2008-2009 food crisis and to increase grants and access to low-interest credit. Her distinguished record of public service also includes work as a chair or member of several international boards and high-level development initiatives, including the UN's post-2015 Millennium Development Goals high-level panel, the post-Busan Global Partnership for Development Effectiveness, the Rockefeller Foundation, the One Foundation, and Africa Union's Africa Risk Capacity. Currently, she is also chair of Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. She's been recognized as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine, among the 100th most influential people in the world by Time. She has received many awards and honorary degrees from Yale, Penn, Brown, and I'm pleased to note a Global Leadership Award from SIPA in 2010. She's the author of several books, including Reforming the Unreformable, Lessons from Nigeria, which came out in 2012 with MIT Press, and she received an undergraduate degree from Harvard and a PhD from MIT. When we polled our students, as you all know, she was among the very top that you were enthusiastically hoping we could have join with us today. So I'm enormously grateful that Dr. Iweala is with us and delighted to hear your thoughts on the challenges facing our students in the world. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
Thank you very much, Dean Janow, for that introduction. And thank you most of all for having this little thing pulled to the front, because as you can see, I'm height challenged and I need to be able to see all of you. But I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning, and I greet all of you, graduates, friends and family who are here. It is an honor because this is one of the most diverse and talented faculty that I've had the pleasure to meet just a few minutes ago, or an hour ago when I arrived, and also students. I understand you're from 79 countries, and there's 731 of you. I just absolutely love the flags. And now I want to tell you that I fully expect 79 invitations to come and address you in your countries in one way or the other. So congratulations, and I'm sure you will not mind if I say a special greeting to students from Africa and those who are interested in working on Africa. And thank you. And Nigerians, congratulations. I feel at home in Columbia University, and I'll tell you why. It's a little bit like coming home, because several members of my family have been educated in this university. In the late 60s, it was my aunt, Professor Ogunyemi, and her husband who got their graduate degrees from Columbia and later went on to teach both here in Nigeria and here in the US. My cousin, Dayo, got both his JD and MBA from here, and my nephew graduated 4 years ago, and then my son, Uzo, graduated from the medical school. So we have a strong family tie to Columbia University. And it's also like coming home because of the honor that you bestowed on me in 2010 with the SIPA Global Leadership Award, for which I'm most grateful. I've been very well hosted since I arrived, and I want to say a special thank you to Mary Janow for that reception, making me feel overwhelmingly welcome. And it's so nice to hear that it wasn't just a choice of the faculty, but that students actually contributed to inviting me here, so thank you. I must also take this opportunity to congratulate SIPA on the occasion of its 70th anniversary. Over the last 7 decades, SIPA has evolved to become the most global public policy school. With alumni that include the former US Secretary of State, the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, Salim A. Salim, the former Prime Minister of Tanzania, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, and Mayor Dinkins is also here to represent New York. And from Nigeria, our former External Affairs Minister, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who is very well known. So SIPA is indeed a beacon of light to the world, especially nowadays when the challenges confronting humanity and its environment are numerous, and they require well-trained public policy practitioners of the quality that SIPA breeds to take on these challenges. As I look at you, I know that amongst you are leaders of civil society organizations, future ministers, future presidents, prime ministers, activists, people who are going to move the world. And as I look at you, I say, remember today, when you get to that position, reflect on who trained you, where you got your knowledge, where you got the ability and the confidence, and return to SIPA. In this spirit, let me introduce my talk today, which is titled Public Policy, Politics and Political Economy. As many of you know already, there's a lot going on around us these days, and the Dean referred to this. A world confronted by several challenges. First, the global economic environment is fundamentally weak and is yet to shake off the shackles of the 2008-2009 global economic crisis. The IMF has over the past year or so revised downwards its global growth forecast, which now stands at 3.2% in 2016, the same level as 2015, and 0.2% lower than its forecast in January. Most advanced economies are projected to grow slowly, below 2% this year, while emerging economies like China and Brazil, which have driven global growth over the past decade or so, are now showing signs of weakness. We see increased financial market volatility, low commodity prices, which has created fiscal challenges in natural resource-dependent economies like mine, Nigeria, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and others around the globe. Closely linked to the economic challenges are the problems of youth unemployment and rising inequality. According to the International Labour Organization, over 43% of global youth population is unemployed, and youth unemployment in many countries is 3 times the national unemployment rate. So we risk losing an entire generation of workers if we don't act. The gap between the rich and poor is also widening, with the rich getting richer and the poor not doing so well. Recent global economic growth has disproportionately benefited higher income groups, with middle and lower income groups left behind. And you see the manifestations of this in what is happening even with the elections here in the US, with the middle class feeling left out. According to Branko Milanovic, a former colleague of mine at the World Bank and one of the foremost scholars on inequality, quote, "It used to be that US growth was pro-poor, in the sense that the growth rates among the poor were higher than among the rich. Now it's the opposite." Oxfam recently reported that the richest 1% have seen their share of global wealth increase from 44% in 2009 to more than 50% by 2015. So while back in 2010, it took 388 billionaires to own as much wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion people in the world, it now takes only 62 billionaires to own the wealth of the bottom 3.5 billion people in the world. Just think of that. 62 people own the wealth equivalent to that owned by 3.5 billion people. This rising inequality is also harmful to the global economy, knocking off about 4.7 percentage points of growth between 1990 and 2010, according to the OECD. Second, the consequences of climate change and global warming are becoming more prevalent. According to the latest report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Earth's temperature is rising. We all know that, with records being broken almost on an annual basis. Heat waves are now very frequent across the face of the Earth, resulting in deaths of thousands of people, like what we saw in India and Pakistan in 2015. And of course, with this rising temperature comes increased risk of extinction of species. The Arctic ice cover is shrinking fast and would have decreased by 20% by 2050, according to the IPCC. Leading scientists on climate change have warned that the melting ice could potentially raise sea levels worldwide by more than 10 feet over the next 50 years, bringing risks to whole countries, habitats, coastal areas. Third, we now face an unprecedented level of terrorist activities. According to the Global Terrorism Index of the Institute of Economics and Peace, we've seen a 9-fold increase in the number of deaths from terrorism since the turn of the millennium, with about 93 countries now affected by this scourge. One of the worst hit has been my home country, Nigeria, where we have the phenomenon of Boko Haram. And of course, all of you are aware of the 276 kidnapped girls, the Chibok girls. Thousands of lives have been destroyed by merciless people who do not want the advancement of society and who do not care for the way we live now. Terrorism and conflict has also led to refugee and migration crises we now see and hear about every day. And it is not just the refugees from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan trying to get into Europe. People have forgotten that countries like Chad, Kenya, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and others on my continent have been dealing with refugee crisis for years. and have been managing millions of refugees without so much as complaints. So I just want to remind you today, because some of you who may be working in that area should remember it's not just about Syria and Iraq. It's about all those other refugees from other parts of the world also. We are still battling to end extreme poverty and hunger, which still affects 700 million people worldwide, according to the World Bank. Even as we grapple with diseases like cancer, HIV/AIDS, while discovering other deadly ones like Ebola, the Zika virus, new strains of malaria. About 16,000 children die every day, mostly from preventable and treatable diseases, according to UNICEF. And that is why the present job I'm doing now as chair of the board of the Global Alliance for Vaccines is attractive, because it deals with prevention. It deals with prevention and allows us to focus on our children, who are the future of this globe. 59 million children around the world are out of school. Well, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I just wanted to bring to you the significant challenges we face, to let you know that, by God, you have a job out there. But the reality of our times, in the words of Nelson Mandela, is that, quote, as he said, as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality exists in this world, none of us can truly rest. That being said, it is also true, as President John F. Kennedy said, that, quote, never before has man had such a great capacity to control his own environment, to end hunger, poverty, and disease, to banish illiteracy and human misery. We have the power to make the best generation of mankind in the history of the world. And already a lot is being done to address our challenges. That is the good news. The silver lining within the dark clouds that we see besetting our world today. You all will remember that world leaders from nearly 200 countries have just recently committed to a historic international treaty on climate change, which includes a target to limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees. In fact, to endeavor to limit it to below 1.5 to protect the most vulnerable and small and low-lying island nations. From January 2016, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which replaced the MDGs, became applicable and now serve as the focal point for governments all around the world, not just developing governments, developing country governments, but all governments, because they are universal, to try to curb poverty and hunger, ensure gender parity, access to affordable and sustainable energy for all, build resilient infrastructure, and promote the rule of law and equal justice to all, amongst other objectives. A lot of work has also been done on how to finance the Sustainable Development Goals and mobilize resources to finance development across the globe through plugging leakages and gaps in tax collection, improving the efficiency of public spending, and leveraging private finance, curbing all forms of illicit financial flows arising from corruption. But for those who are so inclined amongst you, there's still a lot of work to be done. Developing countries will need to pay for most of their own development. One of the things that I say as I go around is that in the future, whatever aid there is will only be for the very poorest countries. Developing countries need to learn how to do their own domestic resource mobilization and how to use public resources and even the little aid they get to leverage private funds. That's what it's all about now. If we're going to finance the Sustainable Development Goals, we'll have to learn how to use public resources to leverage private resources. And this will involve things like bringing out new instruments for risk mitigation, because we all know that private funds have a very heightened perception of risk in many of our developing countries. So I'm throwing a challenge to you. There's a whole set of work to be done out there in the finance area to bring out new risk mitigation instruments so that we can attract these funds to finance development. All the efforts that are ongoing now at solving our problems are attributable to the work of public policy experts, the type that you all will become or have become, the type that this institution and others like it around the world produce. However, public policy alone cannot deliver the results we hope for. Let me say this again. Good public policy alone cannot deliver the results we hope for. This is because politics can derail good policies. So public policy experts must also be good students of politics and political economy. And I often say to myself that before I entered public service, I probably was not a very good student of politics. And that led to many of the problems that I experienced. But I'm not sure I would have wanted to be. That's another thought for another day. For every good measure you seek to implement in public policy, there are winners and losers. And you have to know how to sort them out. You have to know who is with you, who is against you, and how to navigate the field. Otherwise, the good public policy you want to put in place may not work. I really want you, if there's anything you take away from what I've said, to take that away. You must learn how to navigate the minefield. Let me use a couple of examples to illustrate my point. As you all know, several natural resource-rich countries around the world have been victims of, if we want to call it, the resource curse, in the sense that their economies ultimately become too dependent on one commodity. One side of this effects of this dependence is that government expenditure becomes very volatile and pro-cyclical, rising and falling in tandem with the commodities price and revenues. And in fact, for the most part, as we are seeing now in several countries, including my own, the economy falls into a recession anytime commodity prices come crashing down and vice versa. Developed countries like Norway and advanced emerging markets, countries like Chile, have found a way to address this problem, adopting long-term risk management mechanisms and fiscal rules to manage commodity price volatility of oil and copper respectively, and smoothing their impact on their economies. Through this mechanism, Norway built up what is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world today of over $800 billion in assets. In Chile, when the price of copper rises above the long-term forecasted price, often called the reference price, the government saves the excess foreign currency inflows in a special account. In the contrary case, when the price drops below the reference point, the government dips into the savings account to shore up its expenditures. So through this mechanism, the volatility of commodity prices tends to be largely neutral to government expenditure. More importantly, and this is the point I want to note, the politics of both Norway and Chile has yielded a social compact that says regardless of which type of government is in place, these mechanisms, this bit of good public policy is in the overwhelming interest of the country and should be protected. The point I want to make is that such a social compact is missing in many developing countries, and particularly many of our African countries, such that politics then trumps good public policy. When you have even the mechanism put in place, as we try to do in my country, Nigeria, but the politics does not allow this to operate, then good public policy cannot take hold. It's a challenge that we have, particularly on my continent. It's a challenge that is yet to be dealt with, to be confronted fully. And it's a challenge that I put before those of you interested in working on Africa. How do we get the politics on the continent to support good public policy? Please put your minds to this problem. It's alive today. My second example has to do with a very specific one in my country, the cleanup of the fuel subsidy regime in 2012, during my second stint as finance minister. Nigeria has a fiscally challenging fuel subsidy regime. The country exports crude oil and imports most of its refined needs because its refineries are in very bad shape, and provides a subsidy for the sales of refined oil at the pump. At the end of 2011, a total of 1.73 trillion naira, US $11 billion equivalent, was submitted as claims for subsidies by 143 marketers who were importing the product. These numbers seemed horrendously large compared to what I had last seen when I was in government in 2006, which was closer to $2 billion in subsidy. So we decided to audit these claims. We audited about $8.4 billion worth of claims, and we found $2.5 billion worth of fraud in these claims, i.e., many of these marketers were trying to claim $2.5 billion fraudulently. With the full backing of the president and the economic team, we decided that we were not going to entertain these claims or to pay. The pressure from the affected marketers was tremendous, as we tried not only to say we would not pay, but also we would clean up the whole mechanism for the subsidy claims and put in place something more transparent, something clearer. This did not go down well with them. When we stuck to our position of non-payment and implementation of the new verification regime, these strong and well-connected vested interests were angered and seemed to blame me personally for this. There were personal consequences. My 83-year-old mother, a retired professor of sociology, was kidnapped by 4 young men and held for 5 days. Keeping her wits about her as she was totally terrified, she asked them why she had been kidnapped. And they told her, quote, "Because your daughter, the finance minister, refused to pay oil marketers their dues." The kidnappers, negotiating with my brother, demanded my resignation publicly. I should go on television publicly and announce my resignation and depart from the country as a condition for my mother's release. Needless to say, these were some of the worst days of my life. Imagine, when you are in position, you want your parents, all of whom are here with you today, and your relatives, to be proud of you. You want to be a source of good for your family. You can imagine how I felt sitting there and thinking, just because of trying to do something right, to implement a good bit of policy that was good for the country, this could lead to the taking of my mother's life. These were some of the worst days of my life. With my father's support, the firm resolve of the president, we all decided I should not give in to the blackmailers, and I refused to resign. Following a manhunt, I'm sorry, I still feel emotional when I talk about it. And this story is not really publicly known, so this is probably the first time I'm giving the full details. Following a manhunt for my mother by police and security agencies, she was able to make a dramatic escape after 5 days in captivity, where she had only been given water and half of a sausage roll. So here was a well-justified cleanup and reform of a policy, but implemented in a dangerous reform environment where the losers in the reform, well-entrenched vested interests, decided to fight back to derail implementation. The decision not to resign was a very difficult and risky one. As it turned out, it worked. But there are days I ask myself, on my down days, what if it hadn't? What if they had gone ahead and murdered my mother, as she overheard them planning to do, with one of their handlers on the phone? Could I have justified trading off firmness on policy and standing up to blackmailers, implementing a good piece of public policy for my mother's life? What decision would you have made? Faculty, what decision would you have made? I know that one other brave hero, a woman I admire so much, a brave activist and reformer, Aung San Suu Kyi, was faced with an equally terrible decision. Leave Myanmar to be with her dying husband in England, I'm sure you all know the story, and never come back to finish the push for democracy in the country she loved, or stay and let her loved one, her husband, die without her by his side. She chose the fight for democracy, and I'm sure it's one of the most terrible and toughest decisions she ever had to make. Graduates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe I've made my point. In an imperfect world, good public policy has enemies and friends. It has winners and losers. It can result in tough, unforeseen choices. Sometimes you will find that no one can give you a roadmap, and you will have to invent and improvise as you go along. For that reason, to maximize your chances for success, do your homework beforehand. Be principled. Know what you stand for. Then find out who wins and make them your allies. Find out who loses and work out a containment strategy. I really didn't do that well. The good news is that the challenges in today's world are so many, you will not lack for jobs or a mandate to change the world. The further good news is that you have all been well equipped by this wonderful institution. You heard it, you have the skills, you have the capacity, and I sincerely hope you have the passion to take the challenges on. All I tried to do was to give you a bit of a hint of what politics can do and the political economy of very sound decisions, what that can mean in the real world. Let me conclude by leaving you with these thoughts by President John Adams. Quote, "Public business must always be done by somebody. It will be done by somebody or the other. If a wise man," and I added a wise woman, "declines, if a wise man or wise woman declines, others will not. If an honest man or honest woman refuses, others will not. Go out, be that wise man and woman, be that honest man and woman, and in spite of the challenges that I've faced out, that I've talked about, go out, conquer the world." Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, for those insightful, powerful, important remarks. We're grateful that you have been with us today, for your inspiring words to our graduate, for your leadership and service, for your courage, conviction, and intellectual rigor. Please join me in thanking our guest again today.